This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning. You're listening to Money Matters. I'm Chris Hensley. We have a fantastic show lined up for you today. We have with us today Kelly and Juliet Starrett. They have recently released a new book called Built to Move. And I'm super excited to interview both of you today. Not only am I a fan, but I didn't conveniently place these in the office as a gimmick. These just sit around. I use these on a daily basis. I've got my supple leopard over here that is my
Yes.
Bible for when I get hurt. I just look it up and thumb through it.
Love it.
Unfortunately, it's been beaten up and used quite a bit. But I kind of want to start because there are listeners today that may not know who you are. I've been, familiar with both of you for some time, but I'm going to take the time to go through your bio. Kelly is a doctor of physical therapy and is the co-author of the New York Times bestseller book Becoming a Supple Leopard and Ready to Run, and the Wall Street Journal bestseller Desk Bound. Kelly was also the co-founder of San Francisco CrossFit, the 21st CrossFit affiliate. Kelly consults with athletes and coaches from the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and the MLB, the U.S. Olympics team. CrossFit works with elite Army, Navy, and Air Force, Marines, Coast Guards. Woo, that's a lot.
Woo.
It's a
And
lot.
consults with. I'm gonna work on my breathing here.
We see all the dirty laundry.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. And then Juliet, I love that you did this book as a couple. I think that's fantastic. Juliet is an entrepreneur, an attorney, author, podcaster. She's the co-founder and the CEO of the ReadyState.com, which was revolutionized how athletes think about the human movement and the athletic performance, as well as former CEO of San Francisco CrossFit, one of the first 50 CrossFit affiliates. Both of you, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
And I kind of want to frame this. I'm on a tear here personally, right? In the last 2 months, I've read Stephen Kotler's new book, Nar Country, that's called "Growing Old and Staying Rad," right? And then I follow it pairs very nicely with Built to Move because there's some of the same themes there. This is a finance show. If you're a longtime listener, we started podcasting in 2014, so you've heard several times throughout the life of the podcast where we brought in health and fitness topics to a finance show. Well, usually we'll have to make an argument as far as, well, why are we doing that, right? The tie-in between financial success and being healthy. But with this, it's very, very obvious because my experience as a financial advisor is when I sit with people and I talk about their financial goals, one of the biggest things that they talk about are these future goals of traveling. I knew there was a eureka moment when I was listening to the book and you guys talked about people wanting to take their grandkids to Disneyland and being disappointed. So tell us about Built to Move. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, let's take what you said on for starters, is that many of us are very comfortable with thinking about planning for the future. That makes sense psychologically. Hey, I'm going to retire. I need to work backwards from the day I want to retire so I have enough money to project forward. So we sort of can create a model in our heads for delayed gratification and stepwise behaviors that get us to an end goal. And if you're engaged in business currently, which you probably are, you also set quarter goals, yearly goals, 5-year goals for your business. So one of the things that is strange for Juliet and I is that we oftentimes find ourselves along with experts in multiple fields. Here we are in finance, and we fail to apply the same rigor and the same principles towards other aspects of our life. We have already solved this problem in terms of, hey, we do this in other areas. Let's go ahead and start to project forward and say, what do I imagine my 60-year-old self, 70-year-old self, 50-year-old self being able to do? What does that physically look like? I think what we see as younger people, we end up saying, well, I'll save tomorrow. I'll start that compounding interest a year from now. And just like that experience, we're saying, hey, the best day to start is today. We know that if we can get people to start to imagine what their lives are going to look like in the future, then we can begin to take steps today that begin to expose our tissues, expose ourselves, load, we start to realize that we can actually work backwards. And this is the same framework, by the way, we work with national champions or big teams. The national championships, the Super Bowl's on this day. We have this many weeks to prepare. So ultimately, just understand that if you're new to thinking about durability and health and wellness, you actually have a pretty great framework already set up because you're already doing that. Let's go ahead and apply the same sets of tools to your own life in terms of your physical behaviors. And then I'll let Juliet take
Well, and I
next
would
one.
add to what Kelly said, I would challenge everybody listening to this to actually get out a pen and paper or a laptop and write down your 5, 10, 15, 25, 50-year movement goals. Because you're exactly right. When we talk to anybody, there's what I can say is there's no one whose movement goal is to be in a skilled nursing facility at 80 being taken care of by their children. That's no one's goal. Everybody has a movement goal. Now, Kelly and I, coming from an athletic background, we have two movement goals when we're 80. We still want to be able to ski and ride our mountain bikes. Now, will those look
Nice.
like will that skiing and biking look like it does today at 50? No, but we still want to be able to do those things. And it doesn't matter what your movement goals are. It could be literally, as simple as, being able to survive a day walking around Disneyland with your grandchildren. But universally, we all have movement goals. And, one of the things we've tried to do with this book, and, an analogy we've been using lately is if you sort of think about your ability to move as like a wide hallway, and you don't want that hallway to start to narrow as you get older and sort of lose your movement choice. And so, we really challenge people to say, hey, these are the things I want to be able to do, just like, putting money into my 401k or saving for retirement in other ways. Start to think about what you want to be able to do physically and what you need to be doing now and in the future to be able to reach those goals.
Let me just add also that I think some of the financial parallels really work well when we think about our bodies. I think when we think about retiring with wealth or stability or security, oftentimes we're like, what is the complex, financial tool that's going to get me there? And, like, hold on, before you try to hack the market, let's just make sure that your spending is not greater than your income. And oftentimes when we get people into core principles of financial behavior, let's save a little bit every month. Let's make sure that we're understanding where our money is going and what our priorities are. Well, we can apply that same thinking again. We've chosen 10 aspects of physical behavior that we consider to be vital signs, sort of a new set of vital signs of physical practice. And these are the hinges that swing the largest doors. So look, there's 1,000 things you can do, but what we find is that when we give people clear ROI, clear objective measures around some of the aspects of their health and wellness, things that they can fit into their busy days today, they can start. That doesn't take a gym, it doesn't take a physical therapist, it doesn't take someone external. You have control over your life starting this afternoon. And what ends up happening is when we apply the sort of compounding interest effects of these simple behaviors, because they're tightly coupled, all of a sudden we start to see humans feel better. And if you start to feel better, you start to have more movement choice options. And lo and behold, you're in 110 and you're stealing Corvettes with your best friends. And, that's really the goal.
I love it. I love it. This book, I encourage anybody to read it, no matter what age level you're at, because there's so much stuff to take away. It is quick enough that you can get through it, but I hate to say it's concentrated. The stuff that you have in it,
Yeah.
each one of these sections is so important, and you called them, the 10 vital signs. Each one of them, we could probably do a whole show on each one of them. So I'm trying to give myself some guardrails here. But let's back up and just talk about the idea of rewilding, right? The idea of what you call rewilding. What does that mean?
Well,
Take it away,
one
Kels.
of the things that we want people to appreciate is, look, you bring up a really good point around the book. It's every vital sign gives us a cluster of behaviors. So if we take the first one, for example, and I'm actually addressing your question, this notion of rewilding, is that human beings are capable of sort of base levels of function. Your hips should move a certain amount. It takes a certain amount of movement every day to accumulate fatigue to go to sleep. You need to have this much range of motion of your hips so that your back works well. So one of the things that we're trying to do is say, when we say rewilding, we're saying, how can we shape our environments so that those inputs on us help our bodies do what they need to do? And unfortunately, the way most of us are living, for no fault of our own, it's not sort of, we don't end up using our full movement language. It's easy to get sucked into a Hulu show or Netflix late at night, or be running around and not getting enough sleep, or not fuel yourself with fruits and vegetables, and et cetera, just because you're a busy person with a sick family member. I mean, we get it. But one of the things that we can begin to do when we say, hey, let's start with this constellation behaviors, that we start the book with this thing called the sit and rise test, which is a really simple way of assessing how freely you can move in your environment. All you have to do is stand, cross your legs, and then lower yourself to the ground in a crisscross applesauce position. So you end up sitting cross-legged on the ground. And then, without putting a knee down or a hand down, see if you can reverse that position and stand back up. And it turns out, based on a 2014 really excellent study, it looked like that test was a good indicator of how well people age, their mortality and morbidity. What we want you to know is that it's not about strength. It's not about coordination. You're a grown-ass adult. But what you might find is that you haven't touched these ranges of motion in your hips and your knees and your ankles for a minute. And this is a very fair test, believe it or not. It's not a full range of motion test. Like, you don't have to do the splits here or be Simone Biles. But what we know is the number one reason people end up in nursing homes is they can't get up and down off the ground independently. And because we're not asked to engage in this behavior very often, suddenly it's gone, because we haven't sat on the ground or moved up and down, unless we go to yoga regularly or Pilates, or we're engaging in some activities like, soccer or football, or you're being tackled all of it. So what we can do is start to say, hey, here's an assessment of how effortless this is. Try to minimize your points of contact, but also, now that you're sitting on the ground, let's go ahead and watch a little TV tonight. And your homework tonight, if you're listening to this, is to watch TV sitting on the floor, sit cross-legged, sit with your legs out in front of you, sit side saddle. And what you'll suddenly realize is you can start to accumulate 20 or 30 minutes of some positions that are going to make your hips work better, that are going to make your back work better, and then you're going to have to stand up off the floor eventually. So what we've got is, with a simple behavior done in the book ends of your day, we can actually begin to help you reclaim what it is your body should be able to do.
And I would just like to add that, people should feel free when they're trying this test for the first time to do it next to a couch or a wall, and grab a coffee table or chair. Do it in as safe a position as feels comfortable for you.
This is crazy. We're talking like, be safe as you lower yourself.
To the ground.
That's where the bar is,
Right.
But I will say that it's
true.
scary. It's true, and it is scary to some people. I mean, sometimes the looks we get on people's faces when we say, okay, just sit cross-legged. It's just not a position that many people have done and practiced for many years, probably since elementary school. And so I would just say, take it slow. But one of the things we know is that, unlike your muscle mass and some of the other ways in which your body, we know you start to lose things as you get older, you actually should not and don't need to lose your range of motion. That actually should be constant for your whole life. Range of motion is something that you can continue to have and continue to improve even as you age. And so now that we have this book out in the world and we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of people do the sit and rise test, we're also getting a lot of feedback that one of the great things about this test, and why we want to open the book with it, is you can actually quickly see improvement. We're seeing people who are 3 weeks, a month into spending some time sitting on the floor in cross-legged position and working a little bit on their hip mobility in front of Netflix. And they went from feeling really uncomfortable doing this test to being able to do it no problem.
And having less back pain, and moving more, and experiencing better gains on the Peloton and in their workouts. And really, that's miraculous. And so, ultimately, one of the things that Juliet and I want everyone to understand is that this is not a book about exercise. We think exercise is a great extracurricular. Should you lift some weights? Yes. Should you breathe hard? Yes. But you can build a real physical practice that doesn't just happen in 1 hour discrete units, where you can begin to say, hey, on a really busy day where I don't get to go to the gym or my class, I can have a ton of inputs that actually is enough for me to have a care and feeding of my body, so that when the time comes and I have the opportunity or the desire to dance or weightlift or do something, I'll be ready for that.
I love it. I love it. This is life-changing stuff here. I mean, we talk about, well, the weightlifting and the strength gain, that kind of stuff, but just the ability to reach down below your knees. Like, I was somebody who
Yeah.
couldn't do
So say we
that
all.
for years, and then when I started doing balance training and really getting into your stuff, I really, getting that range of motion back. Wow, that's something that you didn't think was possible.
And one of the things that's so great is we're sneaking into a conversation about range of motion. But I want everyone to understand that when you are in pain, right? Pain does not mean tissue trauma. Pain does not mean disease state. It certainly can, but it's very rare. Most of the time, 99% of the time, pain is a request for change. And when most of us have pain, we don't even know where to begin. One of the easiest things to do is to ask yourself, well, if I have pain in part of my body, is my body operating in the way it's capable? So do my hips move the way they're supposed to move? Do my shoulders move the way they're supposed to move? And one of the easiest things we know to help people feel better in their bodies is to say, hey, look, we've created some vital signs around physical behaviors like eating and sleeping and moving. We've also created some vital signs around range of motion assessment. How well can you move in your environment? And if you're struggling, if you're falling below the minimums, because remember, it's not good or bad, it's red, yellow, green, like, hey, I should pay attention to this. Suddenly, even though you may be an expert in some aspect of your life, improving your hip extension in the couch test may be the thing that restores how your knee feels so that you can go walk more. And ultimately, until someone shows you these vital signs and gives you a clear objective measure, you'll probably have some blind spots.
And I
I
would
love
like
it.
to add too that, Kelly being one of the most sought after physical therapists in the world, if he has a client who comes to see him for low back pain, he does three things, all of which are vital signs in this book. The first is he teaches people how to breathe. The second is he prescribes a lot more walking. And third, he prescribes them to start working on their hip mobility, including sitting on the floor while they're watching television. And so, I think maybe there's a notion out there that, these problems are, and again, while the human body is like one of the most complex things in the known universe, there are actually some very straightforward things that people can be doing on their own without seeking out help to make their own bodies feel better.
That's a subversive idea.
It's huge. That's huge. If you are a type A analytic like me, when somebody tells you, hey, you need to work on your breathing or you need to work on your balance, it's almost esoteric. It's like, well, what the heck do you mean? There are
That's right.
very real things that you guys have in this book that show you step by step. Here's things that you can do to change this. Very, very powerful. One of the things, Juliet, that you just brought up was walking. Um, tell me a little bit more about walking. Nobody's ever super excited. Oh, it's walking,
Oh,
but
it's
it
so
turns out
sexy, right?
there's a whole bunch of stuff. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm single-handedly trying to make walking sexy on Instagram. So, if anyone can help me do that. But, we are huge evangelists of walking, and we have 1,000 reasons why we are such fans, but I'll just try to hit on a few. The first thing is walking in our mind is the easiest way to get what's known scientifically as non-exercise activity, also known as, you've probably heard the word NEAT. But what scientists have learned over the years is that our bodies are designed to be in constant movement. We think we've done a horrible job in the fitness industry of telling everyone that exercise is done in a 1 hour block and then you sit for the remainder of the day. It turns out that there are so many reasons we need to keep moving throughout our day in addition to exercise. We think walking is the best way to do that. And it turns out that oftentimes the difference over a lifespan of someone who's able to control their weight and not control their weight is non-exercise activity. It turns out that most workouts in an hour, you're burning 300 to 500 calories. And so ultimately the goal is to get as much non-exercise movement in your day. And that could be the difference between being, struggling or not struggling with your weight. But there's all these other amazing side benefits of walking. One of those is that you actually get outside and get some sunlight on your body. If you walk, you might interact with your neighbors and know people in your community. We find, Kelly and I go for an after dinner 20-minute walk almost every night, 1,750 steps. We don't take our phones. We have a chance to reconnect and talk about our days and, be spouses together. There's also, for those people who are into athletics and training, one of the best ways to recover from exercise and be ready for your workout the next day is by walking. Walking actually clears out the lymphatic system in your body, which is, it's sort of the waste system of the body. So, we could go on and on about the benefits of walking.
Talk about sleep.
Well, yeah. And, Kelly has done a bunch of work with the Delta Force. And one of the things he learned by working with them is that if any of their warfighters are struggling with sleep, to fall asleep or to stay asleep, their first order prescription is they're given 12 to 15,000 steps of walking. So,
Wow.
here they have
Wow.
access to every bell, whistle, pill, drug, you name it, they have access to everything. And their first order is to make sure that they've actually moved enough to have enough sleep pressure to be able to fall asleep and sleep well. And I think the way people can relate to that is, anyone who has like a wild toddler, the goal of it, if you have a toddler, is the goal is to like just crush them all day with movement so that they just fall asleep exhausted at night. It turns out that adults need to do the same thing too, to develop enough sleep pressure to actually fall asleep and sleep well.
I love it. I love it. All right, I'll let both of you know that me and my wife are going for afternoon walks after dinner,
Yes.
and I've been inspired. So now I have a weighted vest. She'll walk. She doesn't have the weighted vest. I have the weighted vest, so I look like a SWAT person or something while we're walking, but it works. I'm getting
It
in that
works.
extra resistance
Well,
here.
and what I want to shout out for a second, that is really progressive. And what you just described is something sort of easily, if you don't have a weight vest, you probably have a backpack laying around. You could load some books in there, load some cans in there, load a 10-pound weight in there. But the sort of technical term for loaded walking is rucking, out of the military. And we find that if we look, what we often think is walking is so low level that really I should be running. And if I'm not running, I should be doing nothing. But we see that rucking is the best, coolest, most amazing way to load your spine, sort of improve your posture, load your feet. And it turns any little walk. This morning, we have a little 1-hour loop in our neighborhood. We got up early. It's our daughter's birthday. And lo and behold, we throw on our backpacks. Juliet's carrying 30 pounds. I'm carrying 20 pounds. And we fly around, and that changes that walk into a real load. And so even a little 10-minute walk with a backpack you keep by the door will change and load your system. And ultimately, we feel like this is one of the most secret ways to increase the load on your body, doing the thing you're doing anyway, walking.
You may have also heard of the blue zones. Maybe some of your listeners have as well. But the blue zones there's 5 or 6 places on Earth where people live the longest. They have the highest number of centenarians, and people also have the fewest amount of sort of chronic diseases and other sort of physical challenges as they age. And one of the things that people do universally across all the blue zones is carry heavy things and do a lot of walking. Nobody in, Sardinia or Okinawa who's lived to be 100 put on their tennis shoes and went to an Orange Theory class. They never ever did formal exercise, right? The people that have lived long and lived well have just always been moving a lot throughout their day, doing a ton of walking, carrying things, putting their body into different shapes, getting up and down off the floor. These are the common things that have helped those people become centenarians. And again, I also want to add here that Kelly and I are obsessed with the word durability. We don't like the word longevity because none of us care that we live to be 105 if we're bedridden for the last 15 years of our life in a skilled nursing facility. But what we all want universally is to have a body that feels good for as long as possible and to be able to do the things we want to do physically for as long as possible. And to us, that's durability.
And takes the hits, because you're going to have a sick family member. You're going to have to jump on a red eye. Some disease is going to come your way, chances are, in the course of your life. And what we're trying to do is say, hey, what are the places in my day-to-day behavior where I'm not having to summon willpower and hire a trainer and do all these heroic things? Where can I begin to place these behaviors into my day, in my 24-hour duty cycle, that builds capacity and allows me to take these hits or weather these very stressful times? It's kind of a stressful time in the financial markets right now. Some of the people listen to this are like, holy moly, my hair's falling out. How do we manage that stress? And what we want you to know is that these same sets of behaviors that are in this book, they make up the map for us to build elite performance. So as we're working with teams trying to win world championships and gold medals, these are the places we start. So these aren't watered down BS, frou-frou, generic ideas. These are this is the platform, the base camp off of which we climb Everest. But simultaneously, we know that these are the behaviors that engaged in, whether you have time to exercise or not, that will allow you to handle higher loads. These are the things that allow our athletes to adapt to stressful situations more effectively, but they also help us come back to our families in a much more intact way.
I love it. You mentioned Centurions earlier, and I have that Peter Attia book on my next read list
Oh,
after
great.
Yeah.
after listening to your book, and then it was mentioned in there. I'm like, okay, I got to check that out. And a lot of my clients when they retire, or just retirees in general, I tell them the death is if you retire and you just decide to get in the lazy boy and sit in front of the
Oh,
TV.
yeah.
If you don't have a list of things that you're passionate about, that keep you moving, that keep you doing stuff, there are lots of things that can come up out of our control. And Juliet, you had a very serious health issue that came up that you shared with the readers in the book,
Yeah.
and you were able to apply a lot of the things that are in the book to that. Can you share that or tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. In 2018, I was diagnosed with very early stage breast cancer. So I was really lucky in terms of finding it early. And I went through a couple of really serious surgeries. I had a double mastectomy and then a full reconstruction 2 weeks apart. And I was lucky enough to actually not have to have radiation or chemo, but still a couple of really big, very epic surgeries and a lot of stress, of course, around that process. And, one of the things that a lot of people said to me afterwards is, wow, you just recover so quickly. Like you recovered from that so
You heal
quickly.
fast.
You heal so fast. And, I was really pleased. Exactly 6 weeks from the day of my second surgery, I did a single pull up. So that was a goal I
Wow.
had. I wanted to do a single pull up after 6 weeks after surgery. But, what I took away from that was I'm actually not a superhuman. I am not a superhero. I have the same genetics as everybody else, and I don't heal more quickly. There's nothing special about anything I do, but I went into those surgeries, with having followed a lot of these practices and built to move. I had rested, I had eaten fruits and vegetables, I had some muscle mass on my body, I had some basic cardiovascular fitness. I had, been training and moving and walking. And, then I went through those surgeries and I kept doing those same things. I kept moving. I mean, that was the biggest thing. I had 2 big surgeries and 24 hours later, I'm up taking short walks around the block and walking around my kitchen island. And so, I think the big things were I was prepared. Speaking of durability, I went into those surgeries with a durable, well rested, well fed body. And then I applied the same principles that we recommend in Built to Move, of course, at a scaled level, right? I probably wasn't walking 15,000 steps, but I kept moving my body and kept an eye on my range of motion, and I slept and made sure I ate a lot of fruits and vegetables.
And protein.
And there wasn't
Protein, yeah.
anything secret. There was no secret there. I just did the basics consistently, and it turned out that I healed really quickly and probably faster than most.
Just
I,
like the
I loved
Wolverine.
I was thinking of over. I love that part of the book because of the things that you mentioned, like sleep and you were thinking about the muscle atrophy and adding the extra protein in there. Those small things made a huge difference in the recovery time. That active recovery, that is really
Huge
fantastic.
difference.
And
We
let
are
me
right
jump.
here. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I
I
just
was
want
going
to
to say
say
we're
that.
right here to. Go ahead.
Nope.
We'll keep going back and forth. You go.
Just that our we don't have diet recommendations in the book. We have eating recommendations that accept any way that you want to come at it, but we have objective minimums where tissues heal maximally, where we keep muscle mass on, where we have all the micronutrients and fiber for our bodies to go. So understand this is not a diet book, but this is a book that you can apply these principles to any way you want to eat. And it turns out Juliet was still able to do that around her recovery, but she's using the same principles today to whoop me on the hills.
Nice. Well, this has been the fastest 30 minutes ever. I feel like we could just sit here and talk for the next 30 minutes, but we have to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for being on the show. My very last question, is there anything that I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with the listeners as a closing thought?
I don't think so.
Well, I would like to
Yes.
point out that if you go to builttomove.com, we actually have a 21-day video companion guide that goes along with the 21-day challenge in the back of the book. So give us your email. We'll send you some video companion, small things every day that will make it easier for you to integrate these things in. So it's sort of a multimedia experience. You got the book, you got this free video companion guide, and we know that in 21 days you can 100% up-regulate how you feel in the world.
So I love that because a lot of the things that are in the book you kind of have to see. That's the good thing about the supple leopard is you can go to the pictures, right?
That's
Well, having
Yeah.
the video, it's like, okay, I can actually see somebody stand up and get down. I'm doing it right, right?
Exactly.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Have a good rest of the day there, and we'll have a good one.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having